imagine you are in the jungle of Vietnam and you fire your rifle and you have a bulletproof vest on, so you think you're pretty safe, but you're not. Unfortunately, a piece of shrapnel gets in through your bulletproof vest and punctures your lungs. Then you're airlifted to a hospital in the Philippines. But instead of going to the Philippines, you end up in the Garden of Eden. You see this beautiful white light. You think you maybe hear God, but in the distance, you see your grandfather who passed away a long time ago. But instead of getting to see him, you walk towards him, and all of a sudden, you're awake.
Okay, hey.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
What's up?
What's up, you guys? It's been a minute. It's actually only been 2 weeks because that's how often we drop our podcast. So felt like a lifetime, you guys, and we're back.
How's everybody doing? Hopefully okay. Hopefully you survived the quiz and all of the time in between. We're great friends now.
Yes, you guys know us so well. You guys know us almost enough to take us to Christmas. You know what I mean?
I know. Are we going to meet your family soon?
Right?
I just want to take a second before we start just to apologize for kind of being MIA the past couple weeks. My sweet baby dog passed away. But I missed you, and I'm happy to be back and enjoying each other's company once more.
I'm so glad that you're back. And again, so sorry about Butler. I truly feel for you, and it's very hard. So yes, now we're back, you guys, and unfortunately for us, this is our last episode. But the good thing is that we can live on forever if you keep playing us. So just keep listening to our past episodes, and we will forever live on. So let's kind of get into it.
So we've talked about so many different aspects of near-death experiences, but we really haven't dug super deep into the science behind it, which is probably because there's nothing quite set in stone as far as this is exactly what your body experiences through these, traumatic events. Therefore, once again, we're not going to have an answer, but
no one's going to know about it right now. And the cool thing about medical, advances is that they're always advancing. I remember not me, I don't remember personally, but they used to bloodlet people because they had a cold, and they're like, well, if we take out enough blood, it'll make room for the good cells, and you're like, that isn't a thing. So as medical science advances, maybe there will be a little bit more information known about near-death experiences. And doing some research about the science within near-death experiences, I did find some pretty cool stuff. So there is a ophthalmologist who is a founder at the Midwest Eye Institute of Kansas City. His name is John C. Hagen III.
Not a sponsor.
Not yet. And he wrote a book called The Science of Near-Death Experiences. And it basically looks at the historical accounts of near-death experiences, as well as experiences from medical professionals. And so it's kind of really cool when people like doctors, I know we had talked about this in the past, but people who are doctors or nurses have these experiences, and then they're able to be like, wait a second, I am medically inclined, I am very right-brained, and they have these experiences, and they even find themselves wait, I can't explain this with medical terminology. This is something that is so different. And within this book, he talks about something called the fringe science, which is something that I'm okay, fringe science sounds a little sketch, but in looking at that, there are tons of different things that happen to our bodies that we can't explain. It's almost how do we all forget about childbirth?
How do things go into the abyss of your brain? Where does it go? And where does it come from too?
Exactly, because and especially with talking about just our bodies and women giving birth and babies are able to recognize their mother's voice and face within 3 days of knowing them. Mm-hmm. And it's how are they going to forget childbirth? But somehow we do, it's just so crazy. And so fringe science, that was something that he talks about in that book. And then also along with that, he talks about, and this is something you mentioned too, about the care that we're supposed to give people who experience near death. like, not just like people who almost die, but people who've had these experiences, and how we treat them after can matter so much.
Yeah, and two, I think it's so interesting to think about it from a scientific method point of view, because scientific method, the whole thing with the scientific method is that you're supposed to be able to repeat it over and over again to get the exact science behind it. And a lot of medical stuff you can do because, we have knee surgeries, that's the same process over and over. There's some variables here and there, but for the most part, it's the same. Childbirth, that's something that you can't study the child's brain as they're coming out because they're coming out of a womb and there's no way to like hook up anything. Near-death experiences kind of fall under that too, because unless you're inducing death, there's no way to absolutely track somebody's brain patterns as the stuff is happening. It just happens. So that kind of makes it like that's kind of an abyss of science too, that like you're never really going to be able to study that. Or if you are, there's the ethics involved behind it. Like, should you be studying this?
Absolutely. It's like, should we push our heart to the absolute break to see if it'll stop and then if we can restart it? And especially with, like we were saying before, like how medical science advances, like there are more people whose hearts have stopped and then restarted because we have defibrillators and because we have these different devices.
Yeah, they've been able to like track methods and then improve on methods. Because it's something that you can't really track at this point, there is a little bit of a split in the scientific community about near-death experiences. You can only take what you gather from the experiences, so kind of like people's survivor stories. But some doctors are very, very, very skeptical. And some really view it from a very like analytical perspective of like, this is what their brain went through, because we know a lot of what your brain goes through when you die, but that's quite kind of different. And because your conscience, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, your conscience being potentially separated from your brain.
Exactly. And so when you were talking about like what technically happens to us when we die. And so there are a couple of things that can induce this. Now, some of the people who are on the like other side, and so people who are, I don't want to call them non-believers, let's call them a skeptic, they say that a lot of this near-death experience is almost like the sensation of passing out or having like sleep paralysis in a way, where it's like oxygen shortage, imperfect asthma, and the body's neurochemical response to trauma. And those are things that basically deplete the way that we're able to get air to our brain, which in turn makes us pass out. And so a lot of different doctors are like, it's because your brain is so stressed. It's because your body's not getting oxygen. But if that was true, and I'm not saying that it's not, I mean, I feel like that's obviously a part of the whole experience, because without those things, you wouldn't be almost dying. But without actual concrete evidence of that, like, how are we able to tell that that's actually what's happening during these experiences? And that's the best that these scientists can kind of give us, is like, it's just like a neurochemical reaction to your brain losing oxygen or your heart stopping, which is in turn, dying. But it's not conclusive, and that anytime there's not anything that's like a total like this is it, it's really, really hard to be like it's not that,
Right. But the cool thing about near-death experiences, and kind of going back to what you were talking about with the care for near-death experiences, is that these people live. So there is an entire life past that experience that when humans die, we don't get that. So it's almost like that may be exactly what it is to die, but you never know the follow-up because you've died.
That's actually really true. It's like that may be what it is, and it might be, but like you don't come back when you go there. Right. And these people have. And so it's like, how do we explain that? So one other thing I wanted to mention was there's this author who's actually an Oxford graduate, and he got degrees in both economics and philosophy, and his name is Chris Carter, and he wrote a book called The Science and the Near-Death Experience and How Consciousness Survives Death. And I think that this book is so cool because he not only goes into like what it is to like have a near-death experience, but he goes into like ancient historical text. He looks at ancient Chinese and Indian culture, and then ancient Native American and Maori and Polynesian culture. And he kind of looks at how they've experienced near death and how it's like retold in storytelling and like what it means to that culture. He also uses the scientific studies, quantum mechanics, and the studies of consciousness to kind of explain what is happening in a near death and how it's not just you losing oxygen or just a chemical response to trauma. And I thought that was so cool because I think the through line through all of this, and we talked about this before, so it's just like full circle episode 6, you guys, but it's the consciousness is not just what lives inside of your body. It's something that's different than just physical and tangible.
Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of goes back to the networks episode, because it's almost like when these experiences happen, it's similar to other experiences. I'm sure that's why support groups are a thing. It's a collective conscious of experiences. But specific for this, it's like you have an awareness of your conscience being separate from your body. And so I think that network is probably so vital in the like understanding of what happened to you.
Oh, absolutely. And also, I just think because it's honestly like universal, like 9 million people in America alone have experienced near death. 9 million. So it's like a universal thing that keeps happening. And with these medical advances, it's just going to keep happening. And it's just, I don't know, it's so amazing that we get to look at this and we have people who are studying this. And I'm just like so grateful that this exists.
I also think it's really cool that we got to hear firsthand some people's experiences. Like Lexie, these people personally. It's not an unattainable thing that we are just pontificating on. These are people that we know, and they've had these experiences too. And so just to think like how many people's lives have we encountered that they have gone through this and that it's completely changed their life.
It's honestly absurd to just think about it in that plane of terms where it's like you probably know somebody that has had one. I know I do. Now you know. And that's what makes humans so crazy and like intricate and I don't know. I just find that's just so cool. Like, and especially with our consciousness and like, how they talk about like you are a soulmate, or I met you in a past life, or we've been family members before, like all those different things, like reincarnation, basically. It's so cool because it's like my body wasn't here. Like we could do the science on that. Like they could take my fingernail sample. I'm original. But maybe my spirit and my conscience isn't. And I've been here before, which is just, I know, it's just like cool to think about,
I think it's also something that I love. And I think I love talking about NDEs for the same reason, but I love when you think about the conscience that it's something that you can't describe. Like we all feel it, but we really can't fully explain what that means. And I think near-death experiences are kind of like that too, where it's like you can write down exactly like these are the stages, this is everything, but really it is just this like outer world experience that people go through that it's like I bet they have a very hard time explaining.
Yeah, it's like, because sometimes you just can't explain it. And even science can't explain it, And like the one thing that we point to like, oh, this is going to explain it like science. It's almost like love in a way, Like you can explain it like, oh, the pheromones and you're attracted to their scent and beep, 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 beep. But like, if you look at it, it's like you just love who you love. Like you can't really help it. Yeah. And if you're going to cross over and come back, you can't help it either. So,
all of that to say there's a level of science that doesn't fully explain things. And this is one of those experiences that it explains, but only to a certain point, and then it says the human experience will take it from here.
So after talking about all of these different topics, I think it would be super fun for us, and just in this last episode, to kind of recap what we've talked about and kind of go over like what we're feeling after having done this.
So what have been some of your favorite moments in this podcasting Bright Lights Beyond experience?
So one of my favorite moments is just kind of like getting to learn more about near-death experiences. And I also think engaging with people who are also wanting to learn about near-death experiences. I feel like doing this podcast has been something that both of us, we never done before, and something that we both wanted to. And we just so happened to find a topic that we felt we could maybe do a little bit of justice or spread a little bit of joy or just like knowledge around. And so I feel like my absolute favorite part is that we were able to collaborate and share with people like a topic that we are passionate about and that we care about. So that's like one of my favorite parts about podcasting. I would say the content in our show, I think that one of my favorite things is looking at kind of how, I don't know, like what a near-death experience was. Like I knew what it was, and like if you're any kind of like spooky girly, like you know what a near-death experience is, but I never gone super in-depth into it. So like finding out what it was and just like really learning like how intricate and how universal this topic is was like one of my favorite things.
So I think something that I really enjoyed was talking about the networks. I don't love all people, but I love people. And I love when people come together and have no commonalities in their lives, but there's something that brings them together, and there's something that is like important enough that they care to meet new people. I think the networking part of it is just amazing, and that there is so much content that these groups create and then put out into the world. And so it's putting so much goodness out into the world. And I love the support groups. And when in episode 2, we talked about the care for people, like we said, and how important that is, because that's something that is, we talk about mental health in this country and how we need to like focus on people, their emotional well-being. I think this falls right into that. And it is going to be something that is very vital, especially if 9 million people have already experienced it. It's important to talk about, and it's important to have those resources. So the networking is just really cool. I like that.
I totally agree with you. I think that was also one of the things that I was like, wow, like there's so many people studying this and like looking into this stuff. And I feel like it's just so great that, there's so many people who can like lean on each other. It's truthfully like, because we're people, and like that's what people need to do. And it's something to be said about people who like, as a punishment for doing bad things is that we solitary confinement.
Yes.
So it's like something to be said about other people finding people who've experienced same things. So I totally agree. That was also like super fun. Maybe one of my favorites, honestly. I loved episode 2. I also really loved talking to people. Like I genuinely, seriously loved hearing from both AD and Santi.
Yeah. Fangirl. I'm a fangirl of both of them.
Yeah, and I just loved hearing their stories. And I feel like it was just so impactful to hear what they were saying in their own words, where we can, of course, like read stories. And we do that all the time because that's so important, because that's another way of expressing like, how they've expressed it. But like to hear it from like the horse's mouth, is the phrase. It was just so awesome to like hear how they explained it in their own words,
Yeah.
And especially with AD, and like he's sitting there and he's like, yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but I saw myself and I was above myself and I didn't know, and I'm back now, and I didn't understand it fully when it first happened, but then like later on I was like, this happened for a reason. And so it was just super insane and beautiful to listen to that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've loved with this first timer podcast experience is learning how much emotion is conveyed through voice, especially in the retellings. I love that you can hear in AD's voice how much it affected his life. And like you said, even though it was something that happened a little later, as far as like the recounting of it, it has changed everything. It seems like the way he talks about it is so peaceful, which is so interesting that, again, this is talking about death or a very traumatic experience. And just the way his voice came across was just so kind and peaceful and like almost gracious for an experience like this.
Yes, totally.
I think both of their stories were very unique to them. And it was also nice to hear quite a variation, but a lot of, similarities too.
I also appreciated talking about the darker side of near-death experiences. I think that even though it might have been a little bit of a darker topic and not something that is the majority of what happens in near-death, it does happen, and there are lessons to be learned in that as well. And so even though it was a little harder to kind of like wrap your head around because it is so positive overwhelmingly, it definitely is a facet, and it does change those people as well. So I appreciate that also.
I also just want to say that I really appreciate you being a podcast partner in this. And again, going through such kind of a horrible past couple of weeks, you are the bright light in a lot of these
Aw.
experiences. So I really appreciate you. And I appreciate the listeners for joining us and making this just such a nice experience because, we kind of promote the Bright Lights Beyond podcast through social media, primarily Instagram. And anytime anything is posted, I just love seeing people comment or getting messages and, just kind of having the network. We kind of created a small little network. So
we
that's cool.
we have and I also really appreciate you as a partner too. You had a hard couple of weeks. You've had a lot of changes, and I just want to say again from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for this. Was a very positive experience for me. I think that we both worked really hard, and I'm just so happy and proud of Bright Lights Beyond, and I feel like that is the most important thing, and I'm proud that we can actually endorse this, and we have fans, and we have a bunch of people commenting, and I just love that. And so I also appreciate you guys, because without you guys, we would have this void of, shouting into the void in a way. So I want to thank Marina. I want to thank you guys. And I just am so lucky that we got to do this. How they say, there's 1,000 little molecules and the bing bongs or whatever has to come together for even a human to be made. But just for this to come together in the way that it did, I'm just insanely grateful. And just this has been amazing and so fun. And I can't wait to see where this podcast goes and just where we both go individually or together, So I'm super excited. Yeah. So in the future, this is the end of season 1, and we're so lucky that you guys came along for the ride. There will be a republication of these episodes on WLUW, which is going to be really, really fun. But, for right now, this is kind of where the podcast lives.
So while we are kind of, wrapping up this journey for now, Lexie and I are both in grad school. So with grad school comes a lot of synergy with projects. So if you were interested in kind of continuing on with us and our various paths of creativity, it may not be about near-death experiences, but let's figure out what we got going on. Okay, so Lexie, what do you have going on that you want the BLBers
to know about. So beyond the bright light, we actually have a fun documentary coming out soon about Bughouse Square. It is right now untitled, so you're going to have to just keep up with our socials to see what that eventually becomes. But we're doing a really awesome documentary with a couple people in our cohort, and so that's really fun. That should be coming out somewhere near the end of January. So like I said, follow us on our socials to find out more about that kind of stuff. And then further, just keeping up with us in terms of, reach out to us on the podcast page, reach out to us on our personal Instagrams or our personal websites. We have a lot of stuff linked. So I'm a big fan of hyperlinks. So even in the description here, I'll have hyperlinks to different things that we're involved with. But please keep up with this. Like we said, this was just an experiment gone right. Just like a lot of times, near-death experiences go right. This experiment went right. So we're just, again, super thankful for you guys and loved doing this.
Yeah. And I hope that nobody has these experiences. But if you do in the near future and you want to talk about it, comment on any of our videos or any of our posts or anything. The network doesn't have to exclusively live within us talking on the podcast. We want to hear your stories.
Absolutely.
Tell everything.
Absolutely.
And we just love juicy details of everything. So
yeah, honestly,
give us it all.
For sure. It doesn't even, honestly, it doesn't even have to be about near death. If you just have,
if you want to just tell us your secrets, we're game.
Yeah, we actually want to hear them.
Yeah, our follow-up podcast will be
your secrets exposed.
Yeah,
something like that. Like we've said 1,000 times in the last 4 minutes, we're just so thankful and happy. And I almost don't want to end the episode, but as all great things come to an end, like Seinfeld, you got to end on a high note. So thank you guys so much for listening, and live life beyond.